All right, brother Dontrell Stroman. You really don't cuss?
I do not use profanity.
That's funny. I mean, not funny like, haha,
Yeah.
but funny, just odd. I thought I've heard you cuss before, but now I think about it, I'm like, maybe I didn't.
No, I try not to swear. Back in high school, I partake in, swearing and doing that stuff when I was young. But these days, I don't use any profanity. I don't see the need in it.
Wow. I feel like it's just part of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was a truck driver for a long time, and not that that's an excuse, but it just seemed like normal commentary. And my grandparents used to swear at each other, but like in a loving way.
Yeah.
So, like they would call each other Fat B,
Yeah.
and he would be like, "Come in here, you fat B,"
Yeah.
Except he wasn't saying B; he was saying the full word.
Right.
But it was like I grew up like that,
Right.
and I remember being like a teenager, and my mom would say, like, why do you swear so much?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They were your parents. You heard them. We grew up with that.
Right.
You grew up cussing.
Yeah.
Like you raised me
Right.
cussing. So you're surprised that I cuss now? I don't know. I think about that now because now I have to worry about like whenever I get angry about something too fast around my toddler,
Right.
and then I see him, and I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
I taught him such a bad lesson.
Gonna follow after dad.
And I got to be careful. I hope he follows after me for a lot of things, but not for that.
That's correct.
So tell me a little bit about you, Dontrell. You are a unique person, not just, for the Masonic stuff that I know we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But you've got an interesting story, and I want to kind of dive into it, I guess, earlier on now. Are you from Mississippi?
I am not.
I didn't think so. Okay, so tell me about early life. I know you were in the military.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
So originally, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, born and raised. I've also lived in South Carolina, Orangeburg, for a very brief, short time frame. Like I said, born and raised Chattanooga, Tennessee. Grew up in a single-parent household. Mom raised us. Dad really wasn't in the picture per se, but we knew him from little interactions. I grew up with two twin sisters. Yep, I have two twin sisters that are still alive. One lives in Nashville, one lives in Chattanooga. And, I guess my life was, I would say, average. You
Yeah.
know, I was introduced to different cultures at a very young age. I know a lot of people may look at me and they say, "This guy seems pretty different." Well, that's because I am. I experienced what some would consider like an African American culture, correct? Like maybe the hip hop, the soul food, the traditions that you would find in some of like the African American homes. But I also had a buddy growing up named Christian who was very influential in my life, and his grandparents. He was Caucasian, and this is where the culture of like the country living, southern living that I kind of am more accustomed to these days. So I always consider myself to be multicultural because I have definitely lived multiple cultures throughout my life.
Now you said that he was Caucasian, which is so funny
Mhm.
because normally I feel like a black guy would have said, "Oh, he's a white guy,"
Mhm.
But you always say Caucasian. You're always very proper.
Yeah.
I do like that about you.
Yeah.
It's very unique.
Yeah.
And just the way you approach things, you have a very firm, good handshake. You don't get that everywhere.
Right.
And so from the very first time I met you, I thought, I like this guy. He's got a good handshake, just solid.
Yeah.
And but so tell me, how was it different, him being a Caucasian male from the South?
Mhm.
You are an African-American male from the South.
Mhm.
And, Chattanooga, Orangeburg, just as south as anywhere else.
Mhm.
And, how was his lifestyle different than yours? I mean, were you in poverty? Were you impoverished when you were growing up? Like, I don't know.
No, it wasn't impoverished. My mom had a pretty good job. She worked at the post office. She's still employed there. I didn't grow up in the slums, didn't grow up in the projects, the ghetto, as some would call it. I don't like really using those derogatory remarks because that is how some people have to live currently, unfortunately. But, like I said, I grew up in an average household. There was no poverty, but, when I say the whole reason I say he's Caucasian, to place it into context, right? a lot of my family grew up in the country as well, right? My grandfather grew up in Cortland, Alabama, very country. They grew up picking cotton, right? Um, but the household that I grew up in really wasn't like that. Not that my mom was a part of any type of like hip hop culture, but she wasn't definitely country. You know what I mean? To me, she was just like the standard, like some place say like the black mom, right? That's how my mom was. But when I got introduced to Christian, very probably around I don't know maybe 2001, up until throughout my teen years, this is where I really learned how to fish, how to hunt. Got really big off into guns, country music. Then I went to high school or middle school, and that was a culture shock because I didn't really grow up in the hood, right? But where I grew up at in Chattanooga, it was partially country, partially city. It was developing kind of how you would see some of your outskirt cities. And that was a culture shock. So I definitely got introduced to more cultures, right? That I had not really been around, such as like gangs, things like that. So I was kind of torn throughout high school, trying to really figure out who I was. It was a very confusing time for me, but went through a couple of phases in high school, but then decided that this really isn't who I am. So I need to get back to my roots, which are the things that I love that's in my youth, such as the fishing, the hunting, the country music. That's really who I was the whole time, but I had to refine myself.
Man, that actually makes me look at myself and have to really think about who I am and where I'm from. I also grew up single mom, sister. Actually, I have two sisters. The oldest sister was given up for adoption. My mom was real young when she got pregnant with my sister, and she didn't know what to do. And she was urged, "This is what you should do. Give it up for adoption. Let the baby have a better life." She always regretted it. And because of where it happened at, she had no access to the information. It's not like she could just go out and find the baby. So I didn't grow up with both sisters, but I grew up with an older sister who now is technically the middle child. And my dad wasn't in the picture for one reason or the other. You know what I mean? I knew him or knew of him, and I had met him before, but didn't. And he's actually from East Tennessee too.
Right.
So, but I didn't grow up like hunting and fishing and all that. Even though my granddad was really big in all that stuff, when I would go with my granddad, we went to work.
Right.
So, he was in construction, and and that picture over there on the wall is actually him on a grader. That's not a grader, that's a bucket loader, but, or a track loader. But anyways, that's what he did. And so every day I would see my granddad put on his overalls, put on his boots, covered in mud, and we would get in his old pickup truck and his cooler full of water, and we'd go to work.
Right.
Me, him, and his dog.
Right.
And that's what I knew. Occasionally I would go hunting with him, but he worked 6 days a week usually. So, it wasn't like he always was out hunting, but he was a big hunter though too. And he's also a musician. So he played a lot of music. So that we did a lot of that. We did a lot of working.
Right.
And I guess, I don't know, I just never fell into hunting or anything like that. I want to. I've never shot a buck.
Right.
I've never shot an animal.
Yeah.
And I'm like a firm believer in if you kill it, you eat it.
All right.
Like I'm big on that. I understand people like to do it for sport, not for me, but so it's just, you made me look at who I am. And like, I think before I might've said like, I didn't grow up with a dad, so I didn't grow up doing stuff like that. But you didn't grow up with your dad in your life, and you did grow up doing stuff like that.
Correct.
So shout out to Christian
and his grandparents. That's important to talk about them too. A lot of people embody the philosophy that if you don't grow up with the father, right, there's things you're going to lack in life. But really, the shout out is to the men that step up, who are not biological fathers, who are not biological grandfathers, right, who step into a child's life and say, you know what, I'm going to instill these values, morals, ethics, and traditions that I have, and I'm going to bring you up in this environment. And that is really why I contribute so much to Christian and his family, because they essentially molded me to who the man I am. Now, my mom did a great job. My grandfather is country. We grew up fishing with him as well. But as far as like my core values, right, they had influence on how I vote today, how I see life. And again, that's why I'm really big on multiculturalism, because it's easy to look at the color of your skin and say, I must identify with this particular culture. even if it goes against your values and your morals. See,
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I believe that men, when they become of age, should start to think for themselves, start to decide what they believe, should question what they believe to see if they even find any validity into why they believe it, and go from there. Because if we always stick to what we've been taught, we're living the life of someone else, right? You got to at some point start being a free thinker and start thinking for yourself and say, well, I understand that I was raised with these values, but does it really align with my interests? And if it doesn't align with your interests, then you got to really find out who you are as a person and what you believe, and go from there.
Right. I think it's easy for people to do that too. Just like you said,
Yeah,
you've learned a certain way. You're either going to stick with it or you're going to become your own person.
that's correct.
And it's hard to make that decision if you have to make it. But I feel like myself, I kind of just was always going to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
Nobody's outside influence really plays a big role. I look at things for influence, but if it doesn't align with me, I'm just not interested in it. So
Yep.
same for you. So what was your relationship with Christian like? Because you guys were friends through high school, I'm guessing, right? Or where did he live at?
Christian lived in East Tennessee too. He literally lived in my same neighborhood.
Okay.
So I could walk to his house. He would walk to my house. We would spend weekends camping, fishing, hunting. His grandparents, God rest them, they both have passed away now. They're deceased. But they would take me to places that I would have never experienced before, such as gem mining up in North Carolina, going down the Ocoee rafting. They would take us to some of these places in Hales Bar, Tennessee, where like these floating cabins were on the water. I mean, we done everything. And we kind of cut ties towards the end of high school. He kind of went down a different path, which I won't get too much involved with that. But nonetheless, I still think he was a good person, and I'm very thankful for the friendship that we had growing
Yeah.
up.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's I had a lot of friends like that, where you spent a certain amount of time with them, you were best friends with them, and then you kind of start drifting apart for whatever reason. He starts dating somebody, you start dating somebody. Their interests don't align with her interests. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So it's stuff like that happens, but it seems like I can think, of several guys that most of them, I'm still like, hey, I hope the best for you. One guy, he definitely went down a bad path, ended up in prison.
Yeah.
And, for some things that he did, which I'll tell you off the air, but he, I hope nothing but the worst for that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so anybody that knows me growing up will know exactly who I'm talking about, because we were basically inseparable, all through high school. But
Right.
now I'm like, we're good. We're
Yeah.
good. But so, yeah, I mean, that's tough, because I think a lot of men don't talk about the fact how important those friendships are
Correct.
with other men.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we share things just like women share things. We share things that we go through that are the same.
Yeah.
The same, like, the way people will look at us or the way we're supposed to be if a girl breaks our heart.
Yeah.
Or how we're supposed to suck it up and just go on and don't acknowledge any kind of depression or stress or anxiety of any sorts. You know what I mean? You just keep it moving. And I do understand that to an extent, but at the same time, we relate with each other so much, it's only natural for us to build a tight bonded relationship. I think that's why so many guys in high school have like best friends the way they do.
Yeah.
They don't become catty. And I don't even know if catty is the right word for it, because obviously I'm not a female. I don't know how they look at that perspective, but
Yeah.
there's just things that I don't feel like we did to each other or whatever. But I don't know. It was, I think men stick together, just like women should stick together. You got to have that.
Absolutely.
And in high school, man, some of your best friends are really like you when you stop being friends, especially if it's in a bad way, something happened between you. It's like a breakup.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't care what anybody says. You can say whatever you want, like, is that your boyfriend? Blah, blah, blah. Like, listen, that was my best friend.
Right.
I shared a lot of stuff with him. He shared stuff with me. We spent a lot of time together. We've done hunting and fishing, and we went to car shows. We went on vacation together. Like, this was my guy.
Yeah.
And, and then when it's over, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's, it's just like any other relationship. So, man, my nephew, who is now like 21, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it's 21, but he's in the Navy now, right? And his
Yeah.
best friend is also in the Navy, and they're stationed in 2 different places. And, I never saw, he's a good looking kid, funny, smart, just has a lot of stuff going from very athletic, and almost never dated any girls in high school, but he was with his best friends, same 2 or 3 best friends all through high school.
Right.
They were always doing stuff together, and so, and his stepdad would always give him a hard time about it. I mean, like, are you gay? What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. And I just never could understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, and even though this guy had stepped up to be a part of his life, there were some things that he did that I'm thankful that he was there for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, man, you can't keep talking to him like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's awful. Anyways, I'm getting on a tangent here, so I apologize. But at what point?
Say something real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were speaking in regards to men shouldn't. I guess it's not popular today for men to talk about their feelings and stuff.
Right.
And I have to say that it should become more normalized.
It should.
Hurt people hurt people. And the more men continue to harbor feelings and not discuss things, that's why the suicide rate is so high. That's why relationships are failing. That's why children are still growing up without fathers. At some point, as men, we got to look at what we're dealing with, and we got to be vocal about it. It doesn't necessarily mean vocal as far as letting everybody know your business, but I encourage all people who deal with something, which is every man born of a woman is dealing with some type of internal issue that we struggle with daily. I don't care what anybody says. We're all fighting a battle, and most of that battle has to do with the heart and the mind. But go seek counseling. If religion isn't a man's out, go talk to somebody, because we got to get it out. Because if not, we're just going to continue down this path of just destruction.
Yeah. Listen, and we do not have to change subjects or anything yet. I told you before we started, we don't have predetermined questions. I don't come into this with any kind of notions of anything in particular I want to talk about. I know there's things that we will talk about just because of our relationship, but
right.
This is a very important subject for me. I grew up anxiety riddled, depressed. For me at the time, my medicine was weed, marijuana. I smoked a lot of weed through high school. I drank a lot through high school, to the extent to where my girlfriend at the time, her mom told her, she would hear about stories, and she told her, like, I think Chris might have a drinking problem,
Mm.
And at the time I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's funny. I don't have a drinking problem. I'm not like such and such, you should see this guy, whatever. Looking back on it now, might have had a slight problem, but it wasn't so much the drinking or the smoking. I feel like the smoking kept me real normal, when I was young, I started driving trucks, and of course you can't, smoke weed or anything like that. And so that was the reason I quit.
Yeah.
That, I quit because of that, and I've stayed off of it ever since. But I don't knock anybody for it, because I know what it did for me,
Right.
and it normalized my life.
Right.
And so, but that also meant that from 20 years old to I'm almost 40 now, I've had to figure out how to deal with my anxiety and my depression and stuff like that. And not everybody has that. And I've never talked to you about this before, so I don't know
Right.
how you feel about that. But, to me, anxiety and depression is normal.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought everybody has this, and some people just have it worse than others.
Right.
I've lost a lot of friends to suicide,
Yeah.
From a young age, a very young age, even up into most recent, not too long, a brother in our lodge, took his own life, and it destroyed me knowing that, because, he was a young man, and probably just was and I know what he was feeling, just overwhelmed, feeling like this is the best possible solution. And we just didn't get to him in time. We didn't talk to him in time because we didn't know, because he didn't really show the signs
Correct.
of depression, because some people show it and some people don't. And I don't typically show mine, but I still go through, stuff. I tell my wife, not to worry about me, because I always feel like that the depression is a war.
Yeah.
And in war, there are battles.
Yes, sir.
And I have been fortunate to win my battles.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping that I get emotional talking about it. I just hope I win the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because I got 2 little boys now.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I'm here for them. And
Right.
so, God, I tell you, we have to talk about stuff like that. You
do,
have to
brother.
get it out.
You do. You do.
You know, and that's one of the things fundamentally for the lodge has been great for me, because when we moved here, you know, I didn't know anybody, and so it was tough. And the people that I did know, something happened not long after I moved here, and I found out immediately, like, the people that I was the closest with had no idea, don't know anything about anxiety or depression, never felt anything like that.
Right.
And it was hard for me to, you know, talk to them about somebody that had tried to, you know, unalive themselves with them, because they were like, how could they possibly do that? They've got kids. And I'm like, well, you know, it's like, and they didn't see it the way I saw it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was just different. So when I you know, I joined the lodge, and now I've got that brotherhood and that sense of camaraderie and stuff that helps me. That's part of the thing that helps me win my battles.
That's right.
You know, and so I'm okay with that. And so I know, again, I went on a little tangent there, but you are 100% right.
Yep.
It is okay, and it is normal to feel that way, but it's also okay to seek help.
That's right.
It's okay to talk to other people.
That's right.
Because no matter what I'm dealing with, I would much rather talk to you for hours on end, if need be, than attend your funeral that I didn't need to attend.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
And for anybody that is out there listening, a temporary anxiety, stress-filled, depressed moment is never worth a permanent solution.
That's correct.
It is never worth a permanent solution.
That's correct.
Because I always come out of it, and, you know, everybody that has ever dealt with it comes out of it.
That's right.
And there's several things you can do. You don't have to do pills or all that stuff for them to medicate you. Changing your diet, working out, you know, doing things that you really love to do. Take time for yourself. Those things can also help you. So anyways, yeah. Wow, that was really kind of a deep moment there.
That was good. You know, I tell people also all the time that developing healthy coping skills, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has an out, but it's really about what you do with that out. I'm still figuring out what my out is. You know, I'm blessed to have a very, very supportive wife, and kids, and my mother, the lodge. Also want to give a shout out to Park Avenue, 362.
Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis, Tennessee. Those brothers are great. Speaking of that, I actually had stood up in lodge at one time and expressed what I struggle with, which is making friends. That has been very difficult for me because I don't build bonds very easy. I have a big trust issue with people. Because I feel that once I confide something in a person, if they say anything, I don't trust them. Dishonor is one of my greatest pet peeves that I can't even fathom how you could trust a person, say, hey, keep this between us, and they spill the beans. So it's really hard for me to make friends. But I will say this. Once I make a friend, he's a friend for life. Once I let a guy in my circle, he is a friend for life, and I would go to the deepest, darkest parts of this world to see it through, to help him. So.
I feel bad about that too, because right as we had met each other, I'm quick to make a friend.
Yeah.
And so when I first met you, I was like, oh, I like this guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to like this guy. And you told me where you lived at.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, cool, you know. And then not long after that, I saw you again. And I was like, hey, I think we're going to be neighbors.
Yeah.
We just put an offer in on a house down there.
Yeah.
And you were like, really? Yeah, tell me about it. And so you were super nice about it. We were talking. And then later that night, you called me and were like, can you send me the house that you put that offer on and that they accepted? And I sent it to you, and you were like, they took your offer over ours. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we bid on the same house, and you got yours accepted over ours. And I'll be honest with you. At the time, I did not know you were married to a Caucasian woman.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't know anything about, the only thing I thought, or I knew very small things that we'll talk about more.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh no, please tell me this was not a black and white issue, because I will be, well, one, I'll be upset, but two, I won't even know what to do.
Right.
And thank God after we sat, because we kept matching everything you were saying. I was like, oh, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And you were like, we offered asking. And I was like, we did too.
Yeah.
And we were going to close on this date. We were too.
Yeah.
And then when you were like, we only asked for 3,500 in closing, I'm like, that was it.
That was it.
We didn't ask for closing.
Yeah.
It was a competitive market at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But this house that we're in now is the one.
That's
and
right.
it didn't show. It showed well because it's a great house,
Mhm.
but there was no furniture in it anywhere. And I was just telling Angie that was on recently that if this house would have been staged, I bet it would have been way more than me and you
For sure.
bidding on it, because
Yeah.
you could have really kind of seen
Yeah.
what this house could have been.
Absolutely.
But man, I'm glad to know that you build good friendships.
Yeah. I didn't think anything, malicious was going on with the realtor and stuff. I thought y'all just something was more in your favor.
Yeah.
And that happens in life sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a true statement there. So, so at what point, because you ended up going to the military,
That's correct.
right? So at what point did you go to the military? Did you before or after you had your son?
It was before. So I spent 6 years in the Guard.
Okay.
I joined in 2012. Joined the Army National Guard. And I went through Fort Benning basic training in AIT. Got out of there and was assigned to a unit out in Sweetwater, Tennessee. At that time, it was called Iron Troop or Iron Horse, I Troop. They later swapped over to N Troop, which is Nightmare Troop. It was a cavalry unit, ACR, Army Cavalry Regiment, mechanized, Bradleys, tanks, up-armored Humvees, the whole 9 yards that you would see in like a cavalry regiment, except without the horses.
What year was that?
2012.
Were you training on Bradley's down in Fort Benning in 2012?
That's correct.
Did you ever meet Andy down there?
I don't know. If I did, I was a private first class. I was in basic. So even if I did meet Andy, I couldn't remember, and I was treated like any other recruit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. He spent a lot of time at Fort Benning. He was a Marine, but he was training Army soldiers on the Bradley, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How funny. You guys could have walked right by each other at one point.
Oh yeah.
So you spent time in the Guard, and then you went active duty?
So 6 years in the Guard, and then so I spent 6 years in the Tennessee National Guard, right? My contract was an 8-year contract. 6 years active, 2 years inactive. I went on and extended it, and I joined the 48th Brigade out of Georgia, IBCT, Infantry Brigade, where they were deploying to Afghanistan in 2019. So I did an interstate transfer to Georgia, because I was already living in Georgia at the time anyways. Transferred to Georgia, and at that time, they activated us where we became federalized, where we were no longer M-Day soldiers, which is pretty much just like Guard status, to federal. And then at that point, you become active duty, and I stayed on active duty for 2 years with the deployment to Afghanistan and getting out.
So how long were you actually in Afghanistan? Like, how long did you have to stay over there during that?
Really, I mean, total, it was between 6.5, 7 months. And the reason I say that is because of the travel, like staying in Bagram. We spent, I think, exactly 6 months in Afghanistan. I was in Jalalabad, which is Nangarhar, eastern Afghanistan, not too far from the Pakistan border. Actually in theater, like, on the base there. But we also spent time in Bagram, 3 weeks in Bagram, and then a few weeks in Kuwait. So it probably averaged out to almost 7 months total. But I always just really say a little over 6 months as far as like where I was, where my mission was, which was in Jalalabad.
So when you decide to, I guess at that point you get out,
Mm-hmm.
what made you decide to get out and not just make a career of it?
That's a good question. I won't go too deep into that. I will just say that Afghanistan was kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
There are some people that deny what they witnessed. But when I seen, women, and I don't want to get too far into it because I still struggle with some stuff, but, when you see human suffering,
Right.
and I think a lot of us have watched the news growing up, right, from 2001 up until the complete withdrawal. We all have this this issue thinking that they're all trying to kill Americans, right? Some of that may be true with some of the radical ideology, but truth be told, man, a lot of them were killing their own people over there. I got a video on my phone right now of where I walked outside, and I was standing outside in Jalalabad in the morning drinking a cup of coffee, and I heard a huge explosion, boom, right? I see smoke just filling the sky right outside of our base because Jalalabad, the base I was on, was also considered an international airport. Loud explosion, and I was thinking, what is going on? What is really going on right now? You know, I'm thinking the base is getting attacked. They put us all on high alert. Go to the your MRAPs, get to your post. Didn't really hear much about it. We just knew that something happened outside the gate. Probably about 3 hours later, we got the news that a suicide bomber had blew itself up right outside of the walls, killed 17 people. And I still got the article on my phone, and I still got the video of the smoke where he blew up at. Uh, Seeing that kind of stuff and seeing those people have to come on our base, trying to help the wounded, seeing Taliban fighters shoot a mortar off in a village, and a woman uh, is dying holding her son, and the little boy will never walk again because there's shrapnel on his back. The daughter will never walk again because there's shrapnel on her back. The father now is going to have to live life without his wife and raise his kids who are now crippled. You know, I don't really want to experience that again. I don't really want to experience um, being woke up at 2 in the morning and being told, "Hey, we got some guys coming in who are wounded." I'll just say I got woke at 2 a.m. one morning and pounding on the door, boom, boom, boom. I was a team leader in Afghanistan. I was handpicked to lead a guardian angel team, and they were told, "Hey, get your team. We got to go help the wounded." Got over there to the uh, landing strip, and the Night Stalkers, which are pretty much the special forces guys for the helicopters who transport the special operators. They were coming in with two blacked out Chinooks, and again, this is 2 a.m. And they dropped the ramp, and there were Green Berets, which is special forces, guys blown up, man, missing legs, missing body parts. I held a guy's hand as he was dying. They were massaging his heart just to kind of, I guess, ease his pain a little bit. Those kind of things, man, you just never forget. And I had guys that were right beside me to this day say, that didn't really bother me. But I look at those guys and they're drinking, they're doing drugs, they're coping with it. Although they have to tell themselves mentally, it didn't bother me, what you manifest shows differently. And that's why, speaking about earlier, men got to talk about things. That's why I'm a big proponent now of, you know, really discussing what's going on in your life because what I experienced over there, sure enough, was traumatic. But those things will never go away, man. Those are images that are ingrained in my head where you can still hear people screaming. You can still, you, you know, I can still see and smell, you know, burning flesh, right? Body parts. Those things never go away, man. They don't. And that was enough for me to decide that I was done.
Wow. Okay. So, so you get out.
Yeah.
Now, at what point did you decide, okay, here's where I'm going to take my next career step then? So, I mean, you get out of the military and unfortunate for you in my eyes, you know, I encourage people to serve our country if you can. Unfortunately for me,
Yeah.
I was too lazy, fat, you know, growing up, and joining the military was something I wanted to do, but never could get myself together to do it.
All right.
Um, but for the men and women that can do that, anytime anybody's ever told me, I'm like, hey, try to pick a job that will give you some kind of, you know, life skills for after,
Mm.
because you need to be able to work. If you're not going to stand for a career, you need some kind of basis there, right?
Yeah.
So your basis is, I mean, you're infantry basically, you know, for the most part. I mean, you're on MRAPs, you're in mechanized, you know, a unit, and so it's like you're not going to be an air traffic controller
Right.
with those skills. You're
Right.
not going to be a medic with those, you know, you're not going to be a doctor with those. So what did, when you got out, what was your first thought? Like, okay, here's what I need to do for work, or did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so you know, like I said, the good thing about being in a guard, right, is you already maintain a civilian life. Now, the unit that I was in, the tempo had already increased, so the whole 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out the summer thing was out of the wall. It was long gone by the time I was getting ready to really get into my career in a guard. So I was already working doing telecommunication, but I was also involved in private security. So my job in the military was a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout. Main purpose of a scout is reconnaissance, right? So we look at what can a person do uh, with that type of MOS, right? You can do law enforcement. You can be a private investigator. You could be a security guard, bodyguard, yeah, pretty much along those lines, right? So that kind of fit what I was already doing outside of telecommunication, which was security. And with that being said, man, that's one of the reasons I was handpicked in Afghanistan to lead a guardian angel team was because of my background in private security.
So yeah, you did say that earlier. Tell me, what is Guardian Angel team?
So a guardian angel pretty much is a team assigned to protect pretty much like a principal, a person, while they're conducting their operation. So we had in Afghanistan what they call KLEs, key leader engagements. So we would go meet with some of the Afghan leaders on some of their bases and discuss just U.S. business, right? How much money do you need? What kind of training are you lacking? How's everybody doing? Well, me and my team would guard, our generals, our colonels, anyone that needed protection while on those missions. And that was the whole part of like a guardian angel. You were kind of like I guess, the protector of who needed to be protecting. And oftentimes that was our highest ranking person on ground during those missions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're out, you're doing telecommunications again.
And private security.
And private security.
Yeah.
And now you got some stuff going on now that you do on the side. Well, you do telecommunications full time still, but you've also got I don't know if you want to call it a side hustle, but it is a side hustle, right? Because it's not your full time gig.
No, it's more like, I would say more. I still do. I call them details.
Okay.
So there's a guy I do work with in Memphis. If he needs help assisting, so kind of like subcontracting work, but also do consulting. And I have my own security business, Delta Protective Services, LLC.
And what do you do with that business? I mean, what are some of the day to day?
So typically, right now, I'm doing more so consulting because the liability, right? So where we live at, the area is just saturated with crime. So anytime you put your business in a place where there's a lot of crime, the insurance skyrockets, right? Also, you put yourself in risk for litigation because if you sign a contract to guard this property or guard these people, and one of them, Lord forbid, gets shot, you can turn around and sue you for, you didn't uphold the contract. How did they get shot when you were protecting them? So I'm very careful about what I do, which is why I've transitioned a little bit more into training and consulting.
Okay.
So if a guy wanted to learn how to clean guns, situational awareness classes, personal protection, things like that.
Okay.
Basic fundamental shooting.
Okay. So do you have a place that you go in particular when you're doing like say a guy calls you and he's like, hey, I want to learn how to clean my AR and break down my AR. I bought one and I don't know how to I can shoot it, but I don't know how to clean it. So he just reaches out to you and you set up a consultation with him and then go to him, or he comes to you, or how do you do that?
So typically there's two things that I do. If a person is looking to shoot, right, we'll go to the range, or I have a good friend who lives in Bahia, Mississippi. He has a lot of land, the same land I hunt on. He will let me use his land to set up a little course if need be. But I like to really get out in the elements. I'm not one of those people to, want to bring guns in the house. Not only you got chemicals, right, but, you're limited. If you want to sit there and practice, up and down drills, you're limited. I don't want to be flagging stuff in my house, although the weapons are unloaded. I just don't think it's a good practice. So I like to be outside. So typically I'll take a table out there, and actually after we get through shooting or practicing whatever we're going to practice, we'll clean the guns, clean the firearms there.
Although it is good practice to practice in your house, not practice your shooting or anything, obviously nothing like that, but
yeah,
it's good practice to maneuver yourself with your weapon in your house, because if you're not familiar with what's going on and it's 2 a.m. and it's dark and somebody kicks your front door in and you've not practiced that, just like anything else, you practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
So you should take some time to practice that. Just like if you got a storm shelter, well, storm shelters are great, but if you've never practiced getting down into one,
yeah,
like we have one in our garage, which I know you know that.
Yeah.
Which funny note is you told me you were like, you got that little oil change pit down there.
Never seen one of those before.
Never seen one of those before. Yeah, because where we're from, on that side of you're from Chattanooga and I'm from just north of Atlanta.
Yeah.
We have basements.
Exactly.
And here they don't have basements.
Exactly.
Or at least none that I've seen.
Right.
So a storm shelter, and what I have is they've dug out into the garage. They cut a rectangle out. They take out all the dirt. They bring in a shelter. They drop it down, and it's got steps that go down to. It's got a sliding door. Whoops.
Yep.
It's got a sliding door, and you walk down the steps into it, slide the door back, and it's got a locking pin. So, but if you've never used it before, it's not exactly easy to go down into, especially when you're not, 6 foot, over 6 foot like myself. So you need to practice getting down there. And you got 2 kids, and you got 2 dogs, and you got a wife, and it's dark, and maybe the power's out, because that's what happens when tornadoes come.
Right.
So, stuff like that is ideal to practice. So not to take away from anything else, but
that is correct. But I more so wasn't talking about what you do in your house. More so if you're training someone in your own home or their home, to me, that's not the time to be doing that. Right. Not only if I enter someone's home training them, I don't want them to show me their plans. Right. I don't want them to show me what they would do in the event that someone broke in their house.
Now, why is that so important?
What's that?
That you don't want them to show you your plans. I just want you to explain that. I feel like I know.
So I don't want someone to show me their plans for their house, because if their house gets compromised or their house gets broken into, and the last person that they shown their plans to was the security company they hired, that's putting me in risk for litigation. Okay. Right? They could easily make the claim that he knew my house inside and out. He was here. He showed me what to do, how to get my guns, where to place my guns. Now these guns are missing. Now, my house has been vandalized. I want to sue this guy. Now, granted, I'd have to hire an attorney to litigate that and, pull footage and stuff and prove that I was where I said I was. But the big thing is, don't even put yourself in that in that arena, right?
Right.
You can teach people the fundamentals, and you go develop your own emergency plan at your house. Now, I do run those same drills that you say. I can maneuver through my house at nighttime, jump in the middle of the night. I have firearms placed strategically throughout my house. I know where to go. I know what room to be in. I know if they breach the front door, where to go to get to the weapon, shoot my way to where I need to be. All men who have firearms, who are the protectors of their house, should have some type of emergency plan in place.
And practice. Practice.
Correct, and practice. But here's the thing with practice, right? Most people become dogmatic in their thinking, right? Mike Tyson said it best. We all have a plan till you get punched in the nose, right? We had plans in Afghanistan too. You're going to go here, here, and here. Write it down. Okay, so what happens when you're here? You got to have a plan B. You got to have a plan C. We call it a PACE plan. Primary, alternate, contingent, emergency, right? You got to have multiple plans in place. And one thing about what I try to instill in people is have a plan, but be fluent. You can't rely completely on a plan, because I assure you, everybody that has a great plan has to fall back to the next plan. Nothing goes as you think. Most people have this whole idea that somebody breaks in their house, they're going to jump up, get the gun off the nightstand, they're going to go out there and run. What happens when you didn't hear the guy, he's already in the house?
Right.
What do you do at that point, right? What happens when a guy's in your bedroom and you can't even get to your firearm, right? These are all contingencies that people need to be thinking about. What happens when the guy kicks the side door in and that's where your gun safe is and that's where you need to get to, right? What happens when there's multiple people that have entered a home? What do you do at that point? Okay, you got a 380, you got 6 rounds, you shot it out with the guy. Do you have extra magazines nearby? Do you have another gun to keep shooting?
Right. And then something that I think about too is well, not only the caliber of the gun that I'm going to be using.
Right.
I watch a lot of review videos, just different things as far as firearms related goes.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I look at too is like, how many walls are we going to penetrate with this round? You know what I mean? If you're shooting an AR in a house, it's going through the house.
Correct.
It's not stopping at the first wall and not the second wall, and
Correct.
probably not the third wall.
Yeah.
So if somebody is at your back door, come through your back door and you shoot in that direction, what's the 3 rooms away? Is there a child in that room?
Correct.
What are they on a bunk bed or are they on a low side bed? So
Yeah.
all of those things are things that you need to be considering, not only as a protector, but also as a responsible gun owner.
Correct.
I mean, those are fundamentals that you cannot miss. You cannot just go buy a gun
Yeah.
and think, okay, I've done it. you've got to practice with it.
That's
Pull it
correct.
out of its holster
That's correct.
and fire after you've pulled it out of your holster. Practice pulling it out and putting it back in with a full magazine, maybe not one in the chamber, but with full magazine, because guess what? It's different.
Yes,
When it's empty and it's loaded, it's totally different.
Right.
So if you don't know, you might as well not even carry that thing.
That's correct.
I had a woman that told me, she's like, "Oh, I got a gun." Yeah, and we were at a doctor's office, and she's like a nurse, and I'm there for something, and she's telling me about, she's got a gun, and but I don't really know how to use it. And she literally goes to her person, just pulls it out, and I'm like, "Oh, this is the most terrifying time I've ever been around a gun."
Yeah.
Because I've seen people that know what they're doing with a gun accidentally shoot themselves.
That's right. That's right.
And it's that fast. It happens.
Yeah.
And so probably the most dangerous person with a gun is somebody who's never trained with it.
That's correct.
So,
or a person has become too complacent
or too complacent
with the firearm. Complacency kills.
And that was, I will admit this, that was me one time. I made a mistake. It could have been a very costly mistake. We had, in the town that we were from, there was like these weird threats, and they were like, "Oh, they found a head in the parking lot at the Quick Trip on 41," and you're like, "Oh, we don't live that far from there, whatever." So I'm leaving to go to work that night. So I tell my wife, "Hey, I'm going to put a round in the shotgun, or I'm going to load the shotgun. All you need to do is ready to go. All you need to do is point and pull the trigger." Mistake. Yes. I was young. Mistake.
Yeah.
We got married real young, so that's why I said I was young. But, then didn't think anything about it. Left that shotgun in that closet. Never thought about it. We didn't have kids, so I wasn't worried about a kid going in there after it.
Yeah.
Then we had some friends over to swim one day, and they wanted to see the new setup that I had put on that shotgun, and I went to show it to them. And instead of, I always kept it pointed at the floor no matter what.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, it's not loaded." And I hit the safe and I pulled the trigger to, and it fired around into the floor.
Yeah.
And luckily it was like a bird shot. It wasn't even, buckshot, but obviously it tore the floor up.
Yeah.
But luckily my little dog had just ran down the hallway, and my friend's little boy had just went down the hallway, and it didn't hurt nobody.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about, my heart sank. I could not believe that happened.
Absolutely.
And that's how fast it happens.
And you had believed that the firearm was unloaded.
And I thought it was unloaded.
That's what I mean by complacency. I saw a lot of complacency go on in theater, even in basic training. They really hone in on negligent discharges, where some people say that it's an accident or incident, right? But the military has a practice that there is no incident. You should know if your weapon is red, yellow, or green. If it's amber, you should know, right, the status of your weapon at all times. And I think oftentimes in the civilian world, we tend to get lax with that. I see people all the time on these videos, quick drawing, and, the gun's not loaded, and then at the range, and then they pull the trigger, and the gun is loaded, right?
Or people accidentally kill their friends.
That's correct, yeah.
And I've seen that way more than I should have ever seen it.
Correct.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they are the most dangerous people with guns.
They are.
So, the argument could be made for mass shooters. Yes, they are obviously dangerous as well. But a gun owner that has no idea how to operate, doesn't understand gun fundamentals.
That's correct.
I took it very serious after that.
Yeah.
So I started training and all that stuff. And it, because you never know.
That's right.
Now you do this other business as well as your full-time job. And your wife also has a full-time job, but
correct.
She also has a side business, side hustle.
Yep.
Now, what does she do that is so unique?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say I love my wife.
I love your wife too.
I love my wife.
She's great.
I love her to death. She's one of the best things that has ever happened to me on the face of this earth. She does permanent jewelry. Her business is called Chains and Charms. You can follow her on Instagram. She also has clothing that she sells at a local boutique called Brighter Days Clothing, and she pretty much does this weld that is permanent, that stays on. Now, in the event that a person needed to cut it off, they could. It's not permanent in the sense that it can't be removed, but it's permanent because it's claspless, meaning you're not going to take it off and on every day. She does that. She enjoys it. She's really good at what she does, and I think she's going to go far in life with doing that if she continues
And
to
she's
do it.
a natural entrepreneur.
That's correct.
She is just on it.
Yes.
She's got one of those personalities where she put her mind to it. She's going to be successful at
That's
it.
correct. Yes.
So it's great for her.
Yeah.
And you guys do all that stuff, not just because you want to run this side business or telecommunications not enough for you. And, what she does full time is not enough for her. You guys have a plan.
That's correct.
And you wanted to preface this plan by telling anybody listening that what? You're not a financial planner, right?
So I'm not a Dave Ramsey, right?
You're not going to yell at me when I tell you how in debt I am.
Yeah, I'm not a Dave Ramsey. I'm not a financial advisor or anything like that. We have a plan. We want to retire early, right? And part of that is getting out of debt, saving money, investing money into the money markets, CD accounts, personal 401ks, investing, potentially real estate, supplemental income, businesses like this, the side businesses, and hopefully we can hit that goal. And people say, well, what is the number that you need to really retire? I think that's subjective. It depends on where you're going to be living at. It depends on your style of living. Some people probably need about $200,000 a year to live because that's the life they've become accustomed to. We're hoping to kind of tone that back a little bit at retirement, sell our house. We've already entered our house with a little equity. So hopefully when we get ready to sell our house, we'll make a profit on that, and definitely downsize. We plan to travel a lot. So
yeah, we want to do the same thing, but it's kind of rare. We're getting older.
yeah,
And I can't remember. How old are you now?
32.
Okay, so you're a little bit younger than me, but it's about that age where I think I started feeling the same way, where I was like, okay, I got to really start thinking about retirement.
Yeah.
And thinking about what the next steps are, because I don't want to work till I'm 70.
Yeah.
They're talking about trying to raise the age of retirement to 70.
Right.
And I'm definitely not doing that.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm not going to take a half day on the day that I die.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
So it's so important for people to realize that, it happens before you know it.
That's correct.
Because today you're 32, tomorrow you're 39.
That's correct.
And then next thing you know, you're getting ready to pick out your fake Rolex for your retirement.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
That's right.
So kudos to you guys. I love to hear you talk about it because I love that you've got a goal and a mindset. And I know you two enough now to where I'm like, they're going to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so let's watch them and see what they do. And that's another good example of what to do, what not to do. Hopefully I don't make whatever mistakes you might make, and I just stick with the right ones. You know what I mean?
Well, and like I say too, with that's why I always put the disclaimer out that I'm not a financial advisor, because life happens, man. You could potentially have all this money saved up, right? Central heat air unit goes out. Need a new roof. Insurance says they're not going to cover it. Life happens, man. That's why I say it's good to have a plan, but you got to be fluent. You can't, and I'm not saying you directly, but anyone in general that has a plan. I have made multiple plans, multiple goals in life, and have hit a large percentage of them. But also, I go through setbacks because we're all human, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's those setbacks sometimes that it's hard for people to catch back up with, because, like I said, you have to dump out a lot of money on something that's major. You're thinking to yourself, like, I'm not going to be able to retire. I'm in the hole, 10,000, 15,000. What am I going to do? That's why I encourage people to have money in the markets, right? Which the market ebbs and flows like anything else in life, but you can't just bank on, going to work every day, this 401k that your job is going to provide, this pension that your job is going to provide. You got to have other sources of income coming in. So when you do hit retirement, let's say, Lord forbid, the stock market is tainted at that point, you still have a little goose egg, somewhere that you can actually go ahead and ease into retirement and hope by the time that you need that money that it's there for you.
Right. And you don't just speak it, you live it.
Yeah.
You don't drive a brand new truck.
No.
Your wife doesn't drive, well, she doesn't drive a brand new car,
No.
but she's got a nice car, but it's not brand new or anything like that. You guys don't go, crazy on clothing and all that stuff.
No.
So you actually live, you walk what you talk. So
I try to embody what I say. There's nothing worse than being a hypocrite in this life.
Yeah.
And I have found in this life that there's nothing wrong with owning nice things, right? I have my ways of things that I like, right? I like a nice pocket knife, a nice wallet, a nice watch. But as far as, dumping money and things to just impress people, because that's the way I see it sometimes in life. Oftentimes we're trying to compensate for something internally that we deal with. And a way of doing that sometimes is hiding that, which is going out splurging. Well, when you splurge, you're trying to impress people that half time you don't even like anyways, right? You're sitting here driving, this G wagon to impress this guy. Meanwhile, you're in debt up to your head, right?
Yeah.
And you're going home every day thinking, "How am I going to get out of this?" But as soon as you get in the G wagon, you feel good. It's a temporary satisfaction to a problem that we just got to really deal with. And I have chosen to not focus on material possessions as much, and focus on the things that matter to me, such as retiring, such as being a good man, being a good father. Because I assure you, we came in this world with nothing, and we are going to leave with nothing.
100%.
Denzel said it best: "You will never see a armored truck behind a hearse.
Yeah.
You cannot take it with you." The pharaohs thought they were going to take that gold with them. They're still being robbed. So you can't take it with you.
Yeah. Well, so, we met each other through masonry.
Correct.
Um, and I know a lot of people are probably going to really start paying attention to things we're talking about now, because you have a unique story, especially when it comes to this.
Yeah.
So when I met you, you had already went through your 3 degrees and you became a master mason through the Grand Lodge of Tennessee,
Correct.
which you taught me was the proper way to say it. So when did you first join masonry, and why did you choose Prince Hall at the time? So that, I guess I should have gave that context. You were a Prince Hall Mason,
That's correct.
and you demitted from Prince Hall
Correct.
and joined the Grand Lodge of Tennessee. And
That's correct.
at the time, I would always say is like, well, why did you leave Prince Hall and join regular masonry? And I said, is it actually regular masonry? And you said, no, the proper way to say it would be Grand Lodge of whatever state, because every state has its own Grand Lodge. And so you taught me that, and now that's the way I address it. So what was the draw to Prince Hall, and where did you join? What was the feel for that?
So to really place it in the context, I got to get comfortable now. All right. So to give a backstory briefly, prior to joining Freemasonry, period, I was a member of the Elks, a predominantly black Elks organization called the IBPOEW. You had a predominantly white Elks group called the BPOE, Benevolent Protective Order of Elks. And I'll later get into this whole thing of why I'm distinguishing the two, because for the disclaimer, I don't even believe in race. But for the sake of this conversation, I'll break it down into these categories.
Okay.
I was an Elk at the time, and a couple of my Elk brothers were Masons. I had no idea there was a difference between a Prince Hall Mason and a Grand Lodge Estate Mason. Had no idea. I went where I was comfortable with these men, and they belonged to a lodge called Paul Dunbar 196, under the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Tennessee. So I petitioned that lodge. It was a lodge that I liked at the time, like a little small country lodge. Kind of fit in there for the most part. It wasn't until, and by the way, let me go back. I joined that lodge in 2014. Okay, when I got out of basic training, because in Tennessee, Prince Hall, you have to be 21 to petition a lodge. So I had to wait till I was 21. Knew I wanted to be a Mason for a very long time. First found out about the Masons back in high school from my JROTC instructor. Well, petitioned the lodge, 2014, joined, and had questions, because you remember I told you I believe in a sense of like multiculturalism, right? So I had a couple of questions. I was like, hey, I want to go visit this lodge over here. And I was told, you can't go visit them. Well, why can't I? You're a black Mason. What does that have to do with anything? We're all Freemasons. We all wear a square and compass. We're all brothers, right? I think that's what the ritual teaches. Yeah, but it was at that point that I discovered that there was a difference. And being who I was and what I believe in, I started to question if being in Prince Hall Freemasonry was right for me.
And so at this point, just to make sure I'm right, you had become a master mason in the Prince Hall.
That's correct.
And the process is still the same. You petition a lodge.
That's correct.
You are voted on.
That's correct.
If you're going,
You're
if they're going to let
investigated.
you and you're investigated, they vote on you.
Correct.
You go through your degrees,
Correct.
which for anybody that's non-Masonic that doesn't know, it's like a play that you're a part of. You don't know your part yet.
Yeah.
It's not until you've gone through it that you can start doing your own part of the play, So everybody has a part for the most part. That's a lot of parts. But so all that's the same for you. So you're going through these degrees. You've become a master mason, which is the highest level of mason that you can become, even though There's a lot of misinformation about, oh, he's a 33rd degree Mason and
Correct.
he's the Grand Imperial, blah, blah. There are different titles. There are different degrees in the different, what we call appendant bodies. But the highest level that you can go is the 3rd degree, and
Master
that's a
Mason.
Master Mason.
That's correct.
And so, we do what we call meeting on the level,
Yeah,
which means whether you're the president of the company or the janitor,
that's correct.
we are the same.
That's correct.
We're on the same plane.
That
And
is
that's
correct.
how we view each other. So you've gone through those 3 degrees in Prince Hall. Would you say they're the same or similar to what you've now gone through with the Grand Lodge of Tennessee? Now, as far as I know, they're both Tennessee, but it is different state to state. So the 3 degrees in Georgia are different than 3 degrees in Tennessee,
That's correct.
and Mississippi are different in Tennessee, and they're
Correct.
different from Georgia. So every state has their own kind of way of doing things,
Yeah, wording.
wording and stuff like that. But Prince Hall, what say you about them? What was that like?
It was similar in the sense of how you're initiated, passed, and raised, right?
Right.
There are some cultural differences, but that's to be expected. And I don't mean cultural in the sense of their skin color, because culture supersedes skin color. Uh, Culture to me is centered around the views, traditions, and values of men. In this particular lodge, there was a lot of ties to social justice, civil rights, uh, things that they wanted to see achieved. And that's probably one of the main distinguishers between the two. As far as, going
Between Prince Hall and non-Prince Hall.
correct, yeah. But as far as going through the degrees, I mean, the wording was different, right? How they may do things inside of a tile lodge is a little bit different.
Right.
But if you're a master mason, you should be able to go in there and still know what's going on.
Right.
So it wasn't that different that you would be like, whoa, this is completely different than what we do. Because I've sat in the Grand Lodge of DC, and they do stuff a little bit different than we do. So we can't look at it as just that's, Prince Hall is different, because you can go to South Carolina and see something completely different, or Mississippi, right? All of these Grand Lodges have their own traditions, cultures, and values. And that's what makes Freemasonry beautiful, in my opinion. That it's not the same, and men that think that it should be the same are dogmatic in their thinking, and they should really open up their eyes to realize that what we see over here in America, it's kind of watered down compared to, from my understanding of what goes on in like France and England.
Right.
We follow a lot of the Preston Webb work, right? Over there, they do stuff a little bit different. So
In England, they have female Masons, and in America, we do not.
we do.
Well, I don't know are those clandestine lodges?
Well, they're clandestine over there in England as well.
Is it clandestine?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
The
I thought they were recognized by the Grand Lodge of England.
They recognize their existence.
Okay.
Similar to
to Prince Hall in America.
That's correct. They recognize their existence, but it's still considered a. And first off, I don't even think England uses clandestine. If I'm mistaken, I don't think Scotland does either. I think they may just refer to them as unrecognized, or does not meet the standard of recognition. Right? They're not a regular body. They can't sit in a tile lodge with the brethren in England. But England does recognize their existence, kind of how the state Grand Lodge recognized Prince Hall's existence before they actually gave them amity, mutual recognition. They said, we recognize you exist, but we don't recognize you enough to actually sit in lodge with you.
Right. Now, I know we talked about race a little bit and how that plays a factor into it. So I think one of the biggest distinctions that I had thought about and didn't know anything about Prince Hall. And to your credit, the same thing that you went through, I went through, but just on a different, I'm Grand Lodge of Tennessee.
Yeah.
And did not know anything about Prince Hall. I actually thought they were the same. I just thought Prince Hall was a different lodge, kind of like a church would be, this is Jehovah's Witness and this is a Lutheran church, and so that's all I knew. And as a matter of fact, nobody in my lodge really talked about Prince Hall. It wasn't something that we had brought up or discussed or anything, but I did go to a lodge right after I became a Master Mason. I went to a lodge in Mississippi for a visit. And when they had these 2 new candidates that were going through their first degree, at the end of it, they give the courtesies, like, hey, you can't wear Masonic jewelry, all that stuff has to wait until you become a Master Mason. And he said, oh, and we don't recognize Prince Hall's is the Black Masons. We don't recognize that. And that was the first time I think I'd ever heard anybody say that.
Yeah.
And I don't think the guy, I do not believe at all that he was being racist in any way. I think that's just the way he said it.
Yeah.
It was very South Mississippi, but I do not feel, I was not getting that vibe from him. And you can typically pick up on that, but he was just, I think that's how he was thinking of it.
Yeah.
Now, Prince Hall Masonry is predominantly Black, from what I understand. Would you agree with that?
It is predominantly Black, but there's a barrier that has to be broken down. I'm gonna break it down today. A lot of men instantly associate Black men with Prince Hall Freemasonry, right? A lot of men associate Caucasian men with state Grand Lodges. That is the furthest thing from the truth. In Afghanistan, before I even got to Afghanistan, I made a phone call and got connected with the lodge over in Afghanistan. As soon as I touched down on base, I was appointed the senior deacon. I was tasked to teach all 3 degrees to the candidates. In Afghanistan, we had Filipino brothers, we had white brothers, Caucasian brothers, Black brothers, African. And the reason I say African is because these were like
actually from Africa.
South African,
yeah.
Ugandan brothers, right?
Right.
And one of my challenges that I had was a language barrier. In Afghanistan, to me, compared to my whole time being in the States, I experienced true Freemasonry. I saw that Freemasonry, regardless if you were Prince Hall or not, all men came together for one common goal, and that was to be a better man and to assist your brother in his times of need. I experienced that, right? Those men who were made Masons in Afghanistan left Afghanistan and went back to their native land. Those Filipino brothers are in the Philippines now, and they are Prince Hall Masons. There is no Prince Hall Grand Lodge in the Philippines, but these guys are Prince Hall Masons. I think men need to get out of this whole ideal of looking at a man's skin color and us automatically assuming what affiliation he belongs to. Yes, Prince Hall may be predominantly Black, but you go to Germany, you go to Japan, some of these other places, you got guys that look like you that are Prince Hall Masons. And how disrespectful is it really to assume a man's affiliation solely based on his race? I've sat in lodge. I have a picture on my phone in Georgia with a white Prince Hall Mason. I walked in there, it was a culture shock for me because this whole time, right, I've been told Prince Hall Masons are Black. Walked in there, this guy was white, and I was like, this is awesome, right? Like this is the way it should be.
And it wasn't one of those like, we rocking with Kevin because Kevin rocking with us.
No,
it wasn't like that.
No, I can show you a picture. This guy was, I don't want to stereotype people. He was not the guy that some people would say like, oh, he's one of us, right? Yeah. Like this guy was his own man. He wasn't trying to act different in who he was. Let's just put it that way.
Kind of like yourself.
I'm my own man.
You're your own man.
I don't try to.
That was one thing that you had when you were going to leave Prince Hall and join Grand Lodge of Tennessee. That was one thing you told somebody over the phone that had not seen you yet. Like, I know I may not sound like Prince Hall Mason, but I because it's right. It's not I don't think it's a bad stereotype because a lot of people are not trying to say it in that way, just like I'm not.
Right.
But from what I've seen predominantly, Prince Hall Masons are predominantly Black, Grand Lodge are predominantly white, depending on your location. I think the bigger metropolitans you go into, have a different set of, brothers in their lodges. Like your lodge is definitely multicultural or multi-race,
diverse,
definitely diverse.
Yeah.
And my lodge is not like that. Not because it doesn't want to be like that or doesn't allow that. It just is not. It never really was that way. And that, if you're not getting petitions, you know just as well as I do, we don't recruit people. So it's, how do you know to go in there? And if I'm a man of another race, I have no problems with Black people.
Mm.
And that's one of the arguments of white men forever. Like, oh, look at all my Black friends, and it's, people will say, well, that's a horrible argument that you use all my Black friends. But it's like, listen, you're painting me into a corner and I don't know how to defend myself. Like you make me want to be, you make me out to be one thing and I don't know what to say to make you understand I'm not like that.
Yeah.
But if I was to go into a room full of Black men, I would feel a little uncomfortable for the fact that I'm different than them.
Why are you different?
Well, only in skin color, but I haven't talked to them yet. I don't know anything about them yet, but sometimes you get that vibe. And I would imagine that a Black man walking into a building full of nothing but white guys has to immediately maybe doesn't care about race, doesn't care about color and stuff like that, but you can't deny the fact that you're the only black man in a room full of white guys.
I do deny it.
But you look at things differently.
That's
but you're
correct.
not everybody.
That's correct.
Right? So
Yeah.
there's going to be people that are going to feel intimidated by it, and I hate that.
Yeah.
On both sides. I don't want me to feel like it. I don't want you to feel like it. That's one of the things I love about masonry.
Yeah.
I love going to a lodge and feeling welcomed.
Yeah.
And feel like I have walked into what I've been told I should walk into.
Right.
And so, but not everybody's going to feel that way. So I know we have a little bit different opinion on it,
So
but
there's something that has to be said, right, about feeling welcome and automatically assuming that a man may feel different because he's walking in a room with people that look different than him. This is where I go back to culture. There are times as a Prince Hall Mason that I felt uncomfortable around men that had the same skin color as me,
right.
Because the cultures were different. This is why I harp on cultures and subcultures, right? It is asinine to think that I'm going to automatically fit in with the group of men in a room because we have the same skin color.
Right.
Only small-minded men would think like that. Only a small-minded man would say, he's one of me because we got this. Meanwhile, you get to talking to him and you realize that y'all have nothing in common. I have more in common with people of different quote-unquote races than I do with people that just look like me. I don't necessarily vote based on how I look and how people that look like me vote. You know, I don't partake in just hobbies based upon people that look like me, right? Nor do I want to be around just people that look like me. I believe in looking at life in the sense of who are my people, right? Who are my people? Are my people just people that look like me? Or my people that care about me, want to see me do good, share the same values, morals, ideologies? That is how I look at men.
How we align.
How we align. I
Right.
look at that in a literal sense. I have been the only black man, right, on jobs before. Didn't really feel off unless I knew those men were bigoted. Now, if those men are bigoted in their heart, which is wicked, then yeah, I feel a little off because it's like you don't like me because of something I had no control over.
Right.
I had no control over being born brown skin. You had no control over being born white skin. So why do we pride ourselves in something we had no control over? I mean, seriously, we have to really start asking ourselves, you're being proud of white power, black power. Why are you proud of something that you had no control over?
Yeah.
You had no control over it. If you're going to be proud of something, be proud of decisions and choices that you made that has got you where you are today.
So I don't want to get you flustered. And I know you're not flustered.
No, man.
But I do feel like there was and forgive me, I don't have somebody I can just look over and say, hey, look this up for me. But there was a guy recently, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. He was also on The View. He wrote a book. I think you might know who I'm talking about. His name's Coleman.
I think you told me about him.
Yeah, I think we talked about him a little bit. But
Yeah.
he was basically like, he feels the same way I feel.
Yeah.
And this guy's more, I think, Democratic leaning. He's only voted twice in his life.
Yeah.
Each time he voted Democrat. He writes for The Independent. He works for CNN. So I've always told people that I'm very liberal conservative.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, you know, I'm not hard conservative. I'm not hard liberal. I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think that most of us in this country are in that same spot.
Yeah.
We are just unfortunate that we are in a two-party system, and you know, it just is it's a cluster.
Yeah.
But in any case, you know, something that he said was like, you can't deny it. You can't deny the fact there are skin color differences, and I don't think we should turn a blind eye to it. Yes, there are, but you know, there are things that we have that here's how we can go about changing things, and here's what we can do for this, you know. So I want to read his book because I feel like it's probably going to be a good eye opener for me as well. But I know that there are probably times that you've gone somewhere and have been turned off by what you've seen.
Because of the culture of men.
Right, because of culture. But I would feel the same exact way. As a matter of fact, we won't talk about it on air because we've talked about this before. But I know you went somewhere and you felt turned off by it. And when you told me about it, it turned me off by it, which is how I know that we feel the same way.
Yeah.
It was not okay with me. It was not okay with you.
Yeah.
And it will never be okay with me.
Yeah.
And the hard part about that is even though we will never fully understand what it's like to be each other, because I will never understand any kind of black oppression. And you may never understand how I feel as a white man when the world, I don't want to say the world, but there's a lot of people that want to point fingers at a white man and say, well, he's got to be a racist because he's a white man. Not everybody's as open-minded as we are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be around anybody racist any more than you want to be around anybody racist. I assure you that it doesn't make me feel any more comfortable if I'm around a older white man or younger white man that uses the N word and the hard R.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I, I I can't tell you how uncomfortable it makes me feel, but it's also a peer pressure thing in both of our lives that I'm sure that if you don't feel comfortable being around somebody who uses the N word with the A on the end,
Yeah.
if that makes you feel uncomfortable, it makes you feel uncomfortable one way or the other.
Correct.
But it's also, there's a little bit of pressure there because it's almost like I don't want to fit in, but I also I don't know how to say that I don't feel comfortable. I think, and as you get older, the more you learn, like you have to say,
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable with that. I had to tell somebody, I distinctly remember having this conversation in 2017 with another Mason.
Hmm.
I was not a Mason at the time. And I thought to myself, man, it's 2017. You can't say stuff like that anymore.
Yeah.
Like this isn't, and he was older than me
Yeah.
and he was a good man for the most part.
Yeah.
But I just was like, can't say stuff like that, man. And I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess he maybe thought I was because of my skin color. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but that's not me.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Anyways, so going back to Prince Hall.
Yeah.
So you've been a part of Prince Hall for how long before you started realizing like I'm maybe not aligning with the ideals of Prince Hall or the ideals of maybe this lodge? Did you feel like it was just that lodge?
No, no. The lodge that I belong to was a good lodge, and I still stand behind that. That those men are good men, and I'm not gonna speak negative about them because they were good. Prince Hall provided a benefit for me. That benefit was the ability to, especially when, again, like I said, in Afghanistan, right? Had I been a member of the Grand Lodge of Tennessee, my experience in Freemasonry would not been the same because because the Grand Lodge of Tennessee doesn't recognize the jurisdictions that operate abroad, right? So the jurisdiction that had territory in Afghanistan was the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. Our Grand Lodge just, established full recognition with the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Tennessee, let alone, another foreign Prince Hall Grand Lodge. So I would have been kind of just with no brothers over there per se.
Well, let's slow that down for just a quick second because it is important
Yeah.
for people to understand that. So, um, in order to open a tiled lodge,
Correct.
you have to have, if it's outside of your actual building in Tennessee,
Yeah.
you have to have dispensation from the Grand Lodge, which
That's
means
correct.
you have to get it approved
Yeah.
that you can do it. So when we do these specialty outdoor degrees and stuff like that, you have to have that approved in advance.
Mhm.
Anything that changes from the normal ritual times and stuff like that. But Prince Hall, or Grand Lodge, Tennessee, does not allow a lodge to be opened in Afghanistan, or that I'm aware of. Right? Am I saying that right?
That's correct. They could, if they wanted to put a warrant to warrant a lodge to operate, they could do that.
But have you seen that before?
Canada had a lodge in Bagram, Afghanistan.
But not like in the States. Have you ever seen a state have a lodge open in Afghanistan?
I have not, but
Not to say it hasn't never happened, but you've not seen it.
I've not seen it. But there are state grand lodges that operate abroad.
Okay.
I cannot recall at this time. I know there was one in Japan at the time, and there's been a few other ones that have operated.
Because I know that there's a lodge in maybe Texas
Mhm.
that is on a naval ship.
Correct.
Yeah, and it might be a stationary naval ship now,
Correct.
but it's still on a naval ship.
Right.
So I would imagine that some people are able to do it. But Prince Hall was pretty popular overseas because they could do just about anything anywhere.
That's correct. You will find more Prince Hall lodges operating in foreign jurisdictions than you would say like a state grand lodge. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's a little bit easier for you to operate
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
in your Masonic career.
Yeah.
And so that's a big difference that people probably should know ahead of time. And then also the difference that you've talked about is mutual recognition. So Prince Hall Grand Lodge and Grand Lodge of Tennessee did not recognize each other. We could not have what's called Masonic communication with each other.
That's correct.
I didn't recognize you as a brother. You didn't recognize me as a brother. And we definitely couldn't go sit in each other's lodges.
That's correct.
To us, each other would have been what we call clandestine. So we weren't a part of the same organization, even though
Hmm.
we're taking very similar oaths and obligations to each other.
That's correct.
We just didn't recognize each other. It wasn't
Correct.
until recently that those both had decided to have mutual recognition. Other states have done it as well.
That's correct.
And so now we were able to actually go and sit in tiled lodges together, which has definitely changed things up a lot.
Mhm.
And it's how we started talking about this stuff. So all that explained, now go back to you're in Afghanistan, your Oklahoma Grand Lodge is, or Prince Hall of Oklahoma is letting you do your lodge there.
That's correct.
All right. So then what?
So then get out of Afghanistan and realize that Prince Hall's been good, but I really want to pursue what I wanted to do initially when I first found out about this whole separation, which is join a state Grand Lodge. Again, nothing against Prince Hall, but I felt that my needs and what my interests were better aligned with the state Grand Lodge. So at that time, I was living in Georgia.
I got to ask you this then.
Go ahead.
How did you know that? If you were not a part of a Grand Lodge, or if you were not a part of a state Grand Lodge,
How did I know?
how would you know that your values and what you were wanting to do more aligned with what they're offering versus what you're getting currently from Prince Hall?
Great question. My time spent in the 278th ACR, I was surrounded by nothing but state Grand Lodge Masons from Tennessee. Most of them were Johnson City, Command Sergeant Major Baker, First Sergeant Johnson. All of these guys, the colonels, all of them were Masons in my unit, the regiment. Like the head guys were all Masons.
Now, are these black guys, white guys?
These are members of, at that time, your Grand Lodge. These are all white men who I was in the unit with, who were Grand Lodge of Tennessee Masons. I spent more time with them being in the military than I did with my own lodge because we're always gone, right?
Right.
They treated me nothing but like a brother. Nothing but a brother. They treated me like that. We would sit down, we would talk, and we didn't converse Masonically, but they would tell me what's going on, how they operate, their inner workings. And I thought to myself, like, this is kind of really what I like. I like their culture. I like how they talk. I like how they treat each other. When you say you meet a brother on a level, like, these brothers took it serious, even out in the field, right? If a brother needed something, let's say, for instance, you left your toilet paper at home. These brothers were serious business about making sure their fellow brothers were taken care of. That stuff drew me in really to the whole ideal of I may fit in a little bit better with the state Grand Lodge. Not saying that Prince Hall wasn't doing that, because they were doing that more so over in Afghanistan. But, my local lodge and the local lodges that I saw, again, their focus, some of it was more so community events, fundraisers, fighting for social issues, civil rights, things like that. That's not really where I align with. And for some men, that is what Freemasonry is, and that is okay. I want to put that out there. That is okay for however man sees Freemasonry. But for me, I am more into like philosophies and ritual work and just really deep esoteric thinking.
I was going to say, esoteric is very important for you and myself.
Correct.
And that's important for people to know too, that everybody is they're going to take something different
That's correct.
away.
Yeah.
And then the Grandmaster Buddy Leach, when he was in here and we were talking, is you're going to take one thing from a degree, I'm going to take something different from it.
That's right.
Something's happening in my life and something speaks to me differently at that time is, I'm just going to take something from it. When I joined, and you go through that first degree and you'll know what I'm talking about. I think any brother that is, at least the state of Tennessee is going to know what I'm talking about. But there was a part at the very end of my first degree that, man, it had me crying. I'm bawling almost, and to this day, I have a hard time getting to that part of that degree because it just chokes me up every time.
Yeah.
But then I went through, I've seen several third degrees, been a part of several third degrees in Georgia or in Tennessee. And it always speaks to me at the end, I think, around the apron lecture, it always speaks to me, but it never spoke to me so hard as it did until that brother passed away that we were close with. And the young man, even now, just chokes me up when I hear that. And all I could think about is him. Matter of fact, we did a degree right after we went to his funeral.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I'm the senior deacon for that degree.
Right.
I'm the conductor. And I'm standing there and the worship was given that lecture and I am just bawling.
Right.
Thank God the lights were off.
Yeah.
But, or dimmed, because if they had been all the way up, people would have been like, "Oh, look at Santa over there." crying his
Right.
eyes out.
Right.
But everybody takes something different away from it.
For sure.
So it means certain things to certain people at certain times.
Right.
So I'm glad that you said that, because it helps people kind of put that picture out there. Like, this is what it meant to me.
Right.
This is what my values were with it. And that was something I did notice about Prince Hall.
Yeah.
When we started doing the mutual recognition, is that I noticed that they were very vocal on the things that they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
whereas we were not as vocal about it. We
Right.
feed the needy, but we don't necessarily post about it to the public. As we may talk about it, but it's not like we're going out of our way for it. Where
Right.
I noticed Prince Hall Masons were very like, whoa, posting everywhere, and we did, this many sandwiches or whatever. And it's not bad.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. It was just different.
Right. It is.
And I think Prince Hall is more attached to the church. Would you say they're definitely more rooted in their religion?
Yeah, that's a good point. We have to be careful, with that.
Well, I don't want to talk about anything that happens in a tiled lodge,
Yeah.
but I think that it's more of because that was one of the things I noticed when they were posting about all the things that they had done for the year.
For sure. It is definitely more rooted in, I would say, I guess it's more linked to churches than, say, a state Grand Lodge. And that is due to their foundation, right?
Right.
That is due to their ties with, quote unquote, the black church back in the day when African Americans or black people, the center of their community was a church or the Masonic Lodge, right? So a lot of their values and morals are centered more so around the ideas of what goes on in a church than ours. Again, that's a totally separate organization. That's how they see things. I personally didn't see things that way, right? And I still don't to this day.
It's like separate church and state.
That's correct.
Right?
And I believe that literally, and there are men that can't unsee that, because when they think of Freemasonry, they think of Jesus, right?
Right.
When they think of Freemasonry, they think of a biblical hymn. When they think of Freemasonry, some of men think that it's a substitution for church.
But it is not a religion.
That is correct.
At all.
It is not a religion.
Man, I've sat in a lodge with a what was he called? A neo-Christian.
Mm-hmm.
He believed in like Odin,
Yeah,
and stuff like that,
yeah.
right?
Paganism
didn't make him any less of a brother.
Yeah.
I mean, Muslim brothers. There's just all different. With Catholics, Christians, Lutherans, Baptists. We're all in there.
Yeah.
But it's not a religion.
That's correct. It's not a religion. They are more linked, more grounded in church. But again, that goes back to the cultural ties
Right.
that you see. But also, I will say this: a brother posted a picture a couple years back, a member of a state Grand Lodge, and up in the east, typically you'll find a G up there, right? They had a picture of Jesus, or supposed Jesus, up in the lodge. So there we go again. Can we really just blame or say, hey, Prince Hall's like this when some of this goes on a state Grand Lodges also? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is based on the men in the lodge and how they view Freemasonry and what it means to them. Because if Freemasonry is a substitution for religion, that's where you go. Like if you miss Bible study, right? I can go to the lodge. If that's your substitution for, your worship, then quite naturally, most men are going to bring what they believe as far as their personal faith into the lodge. And that happens a lot.
Yeah. I was told that during my investigation committee meeting, was that if you were planning to join to get you closer to God or make you feel closer to God or you have a better understanding, we want you to know now that that's not what we are.
Yeah.
We use a foundation of the Bible. There's a lot of lessons that we learn from the Bible, but this should not be this is not a religion, and we don't want you to think that coming in here will make your religion better for you or anything like that.
Correct.
So, and a lot of people don't understand that or have never heard that before.
Right.
So we've talked about a little bit of kind of the differences there, but tell me some of the other differences about Prince Hall. And if I understand this correctly, for Grand Lodge of State, I will just say state instead of just Tennessee, every year we get a new group of brethren that are moving up into these chairs, the Grand Lodge line, right?
Right.
So, we have a new Grand Master this year in Brother Buddy Leach. Next year, if everything goes like it should go, if there's no hiccup, progressive line,
Yeah.
then the Right Worshipful Deputy Grand Master will be the Grand Master. you
Right.
know, and so on and so forth. Now at Prince Hall, the only thing that I know, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Grandmaster stays until he's decided he is done with that time. Is that right?
No, that's incorrect information. He can't decide that without a vote from the body. He can continue the run because there's no term limits. But again, this is not across the board because I believe Georgia has a term limit in the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia,
Okay.
where Grandmaster can't sit there forever. But there are some Prince Hall Grand Lodges that allow it. For instance, I think Stringer, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Mississippi. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that if he's not the current Grandmaster, the one prior, he had been in there close to almost 20 something years, sitting as the Grandmaster of that state.
And nothing against Prince Hall.
For sure.
If this was happening in Grand Lodge of my state,
Right.
that would be a problem.
Correct. And then you have Louisiana, right? Ralph Slaughter. He's been a Grandmaster for a very long time. Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Louisiana. He's been a Grandmaster for a very long time. That causes issues with especially younger Masons, right? Because you have new ideas, you have new ways of wanting to do things. If a Grandmaster's been there that long, sometimes they start to have the mindset of, no, I don't want to do it that way.
This is how we do it. This is what's worked.
That's
and
correct.
this is how we're going to continue to do it.
Correct.
And that is true in everything in life. That's
Absolutely.
why we shouldn't have career politicians.
That's correct.
We shouldn't have people at companies that think people are going to work there until they die.
That's correct.
You know, that the problem with it is that things have changed.
That's correct.
Whether you like them or not,
Yeah.
just because it doesn't fit you doesn't mean it doesn't fit somebody else.
That's correct.
So
That's correct.
all right, so they do some do have term limits, some don't.
That's correct. And with that being said, too, you know, we have to make the point to say that if that is what the Grand Lodge has voted on, that's completely fine. That's what their bylaws, Constitution allows. That's just not the norm in most Grand Lodges, okay? Some other differences between Prince Hall, right? Like, they're really big on formality. So, dress. You would typically find wherever you go, the standard dress for a Prince Hall Mason is a black suit and white shirt, black tie, right?
The penguin.
Do what?
The penguin, like the tuxedo almost.
Or just a black suit.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tuxedo, but, you know, just a black suit, right? They wear those to funerals, and some lodges like you to wear them for stated meetings, right? So they're real big about the dress. They're really big about some Prince Hall lodges do what they call like a third or fourth Sunday visit, where that lodge will actually go to a church.
Like as a group.
And they'll be preached to. Again, this is what is allowed by some of them. We don't do that on our side, right? But if that's what they want to do, that's okay. I never attended those church services because I always felt conflicted. I go to church on my own. I don't really need a Masonic lodge to take me to church. Where I know we have St. John's Day and stuff, that's still not necessarily centered around going to a church, more like a gathering where the brethren break bread, fellowship. But, you know, they'll go to church sometimes together. Not all Prince Hall jurisdictions do this, but I'm speaking about from my experience. They'll go to church. The dress is really important. There's an example, too, like in the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia. You have to be a registered voter to become a member. They are really big on tackling social issues. For instance, in my previous lodge, when I was a Prince Hall Mason, they had a big push for getting people, driving people around to become registered voters, right? That was something that they done, right? They enjoyed that.
Was there a particular party that they were going and voting for?
They did not endorse.
They didn't disclose any of that?
They did not endorse a party. I'm not going to lie on those guys. They did not endorse a party. They just wanted people to vote.
Right.
They wanted people to exercise their constitutional right.
Which is extremely smart.
Correct. To go vote. And part of that was, I guess their mission was to make sure to right the wrongs, because and I'm going to be honest, man, a lot of black men still feel oppressed in this land, right? They feel oppressed. They see Freemasonry sometimes as like a civil rights organization. They want to use Freemasonry as their voice. And Freemasonry can provide a voice. We know that, right? We can even look, even if you take Prince Hall out of it, if you look just throughout history, men have used Masonic lodges for influence, right? Not necessarily to get something out of it, but as the unity that it brings, the bond, right? If me and you are both brothers and you're struggling, whatever you're dealing with, I'm here to help you, right? It brings numbers. Prince Hall sees it the same way. They will march, like the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama does the Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, where they march, right? Although we're not being beat, we're not being hosed down with water hoses, dogs are not being put on us like Bull O'Connor did, right? Governor Wallace, he's not standing in the doorway of the University of Alabama. Men still feel that it hasn't been that long ago that I still need to fight this good fight. Personally, and I may get some critics with this when I say this, I don't feel that, right? I'm a person that at one point felt that way because that was the norm, right? You sit around a couple of older people of older generations, they kind of put this stuff in your head, and you start thinking like, yeah, I do feel a little oppressed, right? But as I grew up and as I started thinking, I don't actually feel this way, and it is not fair for any man in this land of ours to perpetuate a narrative that you had something to do with what happened to my ancestors. You didn't own any slaves today, right?
Right, yeah.
You have black friends, even if you didn't have black friends, right? You're not bigoted. You're not prejudiced that I know of. I'm right. So it's not fair for me to put a past that I didn't live in, nor did you live in, but to treat you as if you had anything to do with my ancestors.
Right.
But there are men today that still believe that they are being oppressed. But even if you ask those men, how are you being oppressed? You're free to marry who you want to marry. You're free to attend an institution of your choice. You're free to work wherever you want. You can own guns, drive cars. Everything that blacks or African Americans couldn't do, we can do today. And while I understand that there are still places in this land that people are oppressed, we're not going to deny that. Mississippi has a lot of backwoods places, but so does a lot of other places throughout the U.S., right? If you look at the overall consensus, I'm looking at my life as opposed to the life of other men. I am free to do what I want to do. The military provided me a great benefit. I belong to the Masonic Lodge I want to belong to. And on that, right? You asked a question earlier. You said, well, how do we really turn it around, right? Collierville doesn't have any black men, but how do we turn it around? Well, I got an easy solution for anybody that is listening. Be more open and inclusive to people of other cultures and other races, right? Black men shouldn't feel like they have to join Prince Hall, right? Just like Caucasian men shouldn't feel like the it factor is joining the state Grand Lodge. Wherever you feel that you're welcome and your interests are, go there. If we want to see Prince Hall, I mean, if we want to see Freemasonry in its totality be what it was designed to be, which is just to bring in all good men, we got to start being inclusive, right? We got to stop this whole thing that happened back in the day where, hey, you call a lodge and you're a black man and you're white and you say, hey, I want to petition your lodge. And we've all heard of stories. I think you'll be a better fit over there at Prince Hall, right? Or you hear white men who have expressed an interest and wanted to join Prince Hall and they say, I got a lodge for you, but it's not us, right? We got to stop that kind of stuff. And it's slowly dying off as funerals are happening. One of the best things that happen, we mourn the dead, but a lot of those old ways have to die off if Freemasonry is going to continue in the way it was designed, which is to be progressive.
Very well said. I mean, you're not wrong. The ways of old have to go by the wayside.
Yeah.
And that includes the State Grand Lodge and the Prince Hall Lodge. We did talk about it a little bit. There are a little bit of, there's going to be State Grand Lodges that do not wish to have Prince Hall brothers inside their lodge, solely based on the fact that could be the color of their skin, could be the fact that they still don't recognize Prince Hall.
Correct.
And there are going to be Prince Hall brothers that do not want State Grand Lodge brothers in their lodge. And it could be because of the color of their skin, or it could just be the fact that they don't recognize the State Grand Lodge. It's unfortunate, and it's going to take time for things to get better. I'm positive of that.
Yeah.
But when brothers like yourself and myself come together and are able to say, hey, listen, it's not got to be like that.
Yeah.
We can all live together in unity and continue to grow, because one of the number one things for us is community. And if we're doing it there and it stretches outward, then that's all it can do is spread positivity.
Correct.
And love, and exactly what we're based on: friendship, morality, and brotherly love.
That's right.
That's the most important thing for us. So, it just is, it's good to hear your take on it, kind of learn a little bit more about Prince Hall. Somebody out there is going to need to know one day, which lodge should I join? What's the difference between Prince Hall and Grand Lodge of whatever state I'm in? And I think you've answered those pretty clearly.
I do want to bring a point out, though, and I'm going to ask you this.
Sure.
Does it make a lodge or a Grand Lodge racist because it doesn't want to recognize Prince Hall?
I don't necessarily think it makes them racist. I think it makes them very closed-minded. I think that there is a problem because I don't think, if you're looking at it from my standpoint, I can understand why they may not want to recognize Prince Hall or Grand Lodge Estate, only because we're different.
Mm-hmm.
But the state of Georgia, better, for instance, the state of California and the state of Tennessee do not mutually recognize each other.
Correct.
It's not because of the color of their skin. It's because the way their Grand Lodge feels about things versus the way our Grand Lodge feels about things. And I think if you look at it from that way, then I can understand it. But if it's solely based on the color of or predominantly the color of their skin versus the predominantly color of our skin, then it's a racial thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered that correctly or how you were asking it, but that's the way I look at it. I think ultimately though, you know, I love the mutual recognition and being able to converse with each other and see each other and spend time with each other because you know that if
Yep.
you've got 100 members at your lodge
Yeah.
and only 10 show up, those 10 are the ones that are making all the decisions. And those 10 are the ones that are always active.
Correct.
And so if there's another lodge, if there's a Prince Hall Lodge and they've got 100 members and they've only got 10 members active, now we've got 20.
Right.
20 good, active brothers that are willing to help each other in their community, which is the most important part.
Yeah.
It's being together and doing things in our community to make it better.
Right.
So,
You know, what I think of, because in today's time in 2024, lodges are called racist for simply not wanting to recognize Prince Hall. Now, while I share a different view that I won't even bring to this podcast here, I will say this. It does not necessarily make a lodge racist if they are allowing men of the same color that you accuse them of excluding inside of the lodge. That violates logic. No one could call you racist if you're willing to have a black man in there, right? I mean, how could you?
I would hope not.
Yeah, I mean, but really, how could you, right?
Right.
I don't call lodges racist. At one point, I thought like some men, and I would say like, that lodge is probably racist, but that was all shrouded out of fear. You know, you asked about why aren't, black men petitioning certain lodges? Well, when you grow up in an organization and you're told they're not going to have you because you're black, that perpetuates fear, and that fear is deep rooted in your heart to where even when mutual recognition comes, you're still leery, right? That's why we see a lot of the older brothers like, oh, I was a little scared coming in here because of what they've been told, right? But as more men see that these guys aren't racist, they got black men in their lodge, right? This Grand Lodge can't be racist. There's no exclusion or bar that is going to prevent a black man from joining. How can they be racist? We know that, and I was asked this recently, is there racism in Freemasonry? My answer is no. People say, that's a lie. I said, no, it's not. Freemasonry is a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory, illustrated by signs, right? Okay. If racism was in Freemasonry, it would be a beautiful system of immorality, right? There is nothing in Freemasonry that condones racism. Racism lives in the heart of the wicked men who profess to be Freemasons. Because I heard a quote a long time ago, and it said, not all good men are Masons, and not all Masons are good men. And that rings true. There are bigoted men in both organizations, right? But that doesn't mean that Freemasonry endorses it. That is a belief that these men have brought into the lodge and tainted our sacred teachings and push it off as if it's some type of doctrine. And I tell people, Freemasonry doesn't inherently belong to any one class, group, race of men. If you are a good man and you meet the qualifications to be a Mason, you should be a Mason. And if those bigoted men can't see past their own two eyes and subdue those passions that we all swore we would do, they need to leave. You need to leave the organization because you're not being a good Mason. You're not upholding our values.
Yeah. Well said. And listen, I always appreciate sitting down and talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming in and talking with me today. So tell everybody one more time where they can find your business and your wife's business.
All right.
So that way we can end with that. But
all right. So my business name is Delta Protective Services, LLC. I'm not currently on Facebook, but I do have an email address, deltaprotectiveservice@gmail.com. I do have a business card. I don't really put myself out there too much, just because I don't want to be that person that is taking on more than I can handle currently, right?
Sure.
I do have certain people that I work with more so. My wife's business is Chains and Charms and Brighter Days Clothing.
So. Okay. Well, we'll put those both down in the description.
Yep.
And listen, we're going to do this again several times. We'll talk about everything in life in general. We'll get some other brothers in here and we'll just chit chat. And, but always a pleasure. I thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir.